Welcome to the fifth or sixth quarterly update. A lot to update. It seems like the last 3 months I probably say it every time, but it seems like the last 3 months have had numerous changes across the world of AI, and we advanced in so many things, in models and in regulation and in legal battles, and even in kind of what we expect. I now started a little amusing set of cartoons that we publish every week with comments on the world. I just put one of them as an example here. But the point is that at first it was just one cartoon because there was only one big thing to update, and now it's like something that happens every couple of days. So besides update on the real world, I'll say that a book that we wrote based on the input from many of you, summarizing the content discussed in the sessions at Columbia, updates on the real world, is now available. There's a link and a QR code that you can go to buy this book if you don't already have it from one of the programs. Even this book is something that we keep updating every couple of months now, at least a few chapters, because despite trying to be as relevant as possible, the world changes so fast that we constantly have to change something about what things that we said are going to happen in a year, happen in 6 months, and things that we say will never happen materialize, and so on. So there you have it, a book. And at the end of the session, we're going to give a few copies to those of you who don't have them of the most recent version of this book with some twist at the end. Okay, so today we're going to start with the winners and losers. Like, who are the ones who got the most and the least from AI in the last couple of months? As you'll see, as always, some people change columns fast. And we're going to talk a little bit about the new tools that are out there, ChatGPT 5, Opus 4.1, many tools from Gemini that are relevant, some policy and regulation, cutting-edge research that I think might change a few of the underlying assumptions on AI, and of course, everyone's favorite part, the predictions on the future. I'll say already, this is the best quarter we have in terms of predictions. I think most predictions we had already materialized, and we got a lot of good feedback on doing that. Finally, we're going to have our guest, Peter Norvig. I'll tell you more about him in case you don't know his work before, but he is one of the godfathers of AI. In the early days of AI, he wrote a textbook called Artificial Intelligence, A Modern Approach, which became the go-to textbook for any scientist. So most people at OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, who study AI at some point encounter Peter, and on top of that, he was Google's director of research. So at some point, he even was in one of the pillars of AI shaping how it is today. Starting with the winners and losers and AI. So I put the top ones in two side columns. The winners of AI that I think unexpected but are really big ones are gamers. Most AI companies created a tool now that allows people to create games easily. So where gaming companies, now on the losers side, used to make a fortune and be competitors to Hollywood and to the music industry in how sophisticated they are, now there are more and more games, especially the easy ones that you kind of have on your mobile phone, that can be done by a prompt. If you've seen OpenAI's ChatGPT 5 announcement, they just as a prompt created a simple game for the phone, and even more complex games. Think Call of Duty, where you have a first-person shooter and you have environments and so are now relatively easy to make, including complex things like you look at the environment and you go to the left and you shoot a barrel, and then you go back to the right, and then you go back to the left. The barrel is still broken the way it was before, so it remembers all the components. A remarkable advance in how easy it is to develop games, which means that gamers now have a lot of control, and that is something that wasn't on the menu 3 months ago. Google emerges as one of the victorious companies when it comes to AI. If you attended any of the classes, we have a list of kind of companies in the world of AI and where they rank compared when it comes to benchmark performance on all kinds of metrics, where they rank when it comes to number of users, and how they rank in terms of how much money. Google was not in the top 5 only 6 months ago. Now they're number 3. Gaining grounds very, very fast, and some things they're already number 1. So they're overall number 3 because still their performance on some benchmarks is below that of Anthropic and OpenAI. But on some benchmarks like video editing and video production, they're far ahead. So if I had to make predictions, and you'll see the prediction later, I think Google is going to be actually the winner in the next quarter. They're going to be the top company when it comes to AI. They put a lot of effort into it, and they also have a lot of resources that are unique to Google and allow them to do better. Meta, another company that is doing remarkable well, not just on the AI, but also on the front, if you want, PR of AI. Probably many of you heard about the Meta super intelligence lab that they built in the last 3 months, and also about the salary war, where they started to poach leading engineers from all other AI companies with salaries that start in many, many millions and end with even $1 billion offering that wasn't taken, but $1 billion offering to Mira Murati to join their ranks. This shows Meta's deep interest in AI and also allows them to really advance their performance remarkably. They now have, I would say, some of the top engineers in the world under the same house, and those work together to do a remarkable job. Figma, we don't think of it necessarily as an AI company per se, but they are one of the kind of companies that really brought the idea of diffusion algorithms, as in the algorithms that make images, into the forefront. They went public this quarter. I think a month ago they went public with, some say, the biggest IPO of 2025. Their stock, of course, jumped 250% on the first day. It's still very, very high, so much so that most people could not even get access to stocks in advance. Many of my friends who are investors who have access try to get in on the deal before it happened, and one of them, a friend of mine, told me that he called his broker, and the broker picked up his phone and said, "Scott, I can't get you a Figma stock no matter what," before he even knew what he's asking. So Figma really shows that when AI companies go public, or companies that have AI go public, if they're doing a good job, their multiples are remarkable. We'll speak in a second about other AI companies who choose not to go this route. Right now there's a change in how AI companies deal with money. They mostly choose to stay private, but as an example, when companies do go public, they go public big. Amazon is another winner in the space of AI in a different dimension, not because of their AI models that didn't improve much, because of the deal making. If you follow the news on deal making, Amazon in the last quarter cut a deal with the New York Times where rather than being sued like OpenAI is and Microsoft is by New York Times for stealing the data, they have a deal now where New York Times give them the data and they can use it to develop their models. The deal, of course, is public, and because of both companies being public, and we know how much money it was. And it's very, very little money for Amazon and very bad deal for New York Times. The deal is that New York Times gets $25 million for access to all of the data that is used by Amazon and Anthropic in that sense for their models. This sets the bar for how much other data creators like Wall Street Journal or Fox News will aim to get from deals. People say that it was a bad deal for New York Times. New York Times could have easily gotten 10 times more. Just to be clear, 25 million is, I think, if I'm correct, 10% of their revenues. So they could have gotten basically 100% from Amazon, and it would still be reasonable for Amazon and still would be not maybe the most value that New York Times can get. So they got a pretty bad deal when it comes to how much money they took from this deal. China emerges as a victorious entity in this last 3 months, both because of how they managed the deal with the Trump administration. No tariffs on China yet. They got access to the H20 servers from NVIDIA. They get access to their own servers that they built. They are very much in control of the AI advancement. They're the leaders in video editing compared to most American companies other than Google. So they're really emerging as a country that is one of the biggest players in AI, even though only 3 months ago many people discounted them and said like they're 5 years behind. Finally, consulting industries that were already making a lot of money in 2024 from AI are winners, specifically in the world of cyber. More and more big banks, big organizations are worried that they're going to be hacked through their AI agents, and they hire consulting firms who specialize in helping you protect yourself from AI attacks. Consulting generally is a really good business for AI because most companies that are not AI companies are worried that they would do it not the right way, so they hire companies like Deloitte or Accenture to help them, and those milked money from 2024. Now most AI companies realize that there's an untapped funnel of income that they're not going to, so most of them now created their own. So OpenAI now has an entire arm of what they call front engineers, or basically consultants that help you install or set up your interaction with OpenAI. Same is true for Google and for Anthropic and Microsoft. They all are starting to go into consulting for AI as a business. tons of money there. Some say more money than actually in the AI business itself. So if a company tries to work with OpenAI regularly and just pay them royalties for some or subscription for some of their services, they would pay less than they would pay the OpenAI engineers who are helping them set it up. Losers are, first of all, the gaming companies whose stocks already fell. Those that are public because of the announcement from Google last week that Google now has an entire engine that allows you to make computer games easily. Entry-level coders also show a big drop. So if you're a programmer who just finished undergrad, learned computer science, you're a good Python programmer, your average salary used to be about $250,000 a year, and now it's $165,000 a year and going down by the day. So presumably we're looking at high-end programmers, those who can really do complex stuff, getting even higher salaries. They're in the $900,000 to $1.1 million average right now. Those are the ones being hired by Anthropic and Google and OpenAI. But if you are an entry-level coder, your job is very much at risk. Tapping my own funnel, I would say academia is one of the biggest losers of the last quarter. Out of the nearly 100 academic papers that came up this last quarter that speak about the benefits of AI, innovation of AI, assessment of AI, nearly zero. I think only one or two could count as academic because they had an academic person on the list, but most of them, by a large number, come from the AI companies. They are the ones that have access to all the AI models. They can try things, they have the budget to do it. So unfortunately, the best papers in the last 3 months all came not from us academics who spend all of our life trying to do just that, but from OpenAI as a side business doing some research and publishing it. Really a shameful thing for us. We have to think of ways to make ourselves relevant. Another loser of the last quarter are the social activists, peace activists, non-profit, generally liberal people who think of themselves as protectors of some of the things that AI is trying to look into. Those are all suffering a lot. If you follow the news on the regulation in the US, I'm going to talk about it later a little bit more. Free speech gets a lot of already kind of controversial titles when it's being seen as something that is used to silence people, or it's being used to promote ideas that are not free. Now AIs are also part of this conversation. The new AI Act from the Trump administration says that AIs should have free speech. You should not be able to censor AI for saying anything, including false or fake news. AI is not allowed to speak about things that are considered woke, according to the new administration's policies, meaning DEI should not be trained into AI. Of course, if it comes up with thinking about DEI, it's okay, but if you train it to be more kind of DEI friendly, you're doing something that is not welcomed by the kind of organization. In the image of how we think about the world changing right now, AI is definitely suffering, and those people who think of themselves as more protectors of the old type of AI, like AI that has no biases, AI that favors type of truth on others, and so on, you had a tough quarter. Grok is one of the biggest losers. That's xAI's product, not because of performance. It performs remarkably well. It just got a lot of criticism from how it works. I'm going to mention in a second, but already saying it right now. Grok has all kinds of features that other companies try to prevent as its poster features. For example, you can use Grok to make porn videos now. As a prompt, make me a porn video, and it will do it, whereas other companies try to prevent it and make sure that it doesn't happen. Grok encourages it. There's a mode called Grok Spicy. It's all about making these images. So Grok, for now, tries to become the unique AI model for those who don't like the other ones. It materializes right now in business. They don't get enough business. They don't get a lot of money for their product. They have a lot less subscriptions than anyone else. So Grok, as a tool right now, by gambling on this approach, so far isn't getting a lot of work. And I would say that in the context of business, which is the context of this session, I would say the public lost a lot because there emerges a new model for how to do business in the world of AI that isn't good for the public, in my mind, and that is that you don't do a public offering anymore. We used to having companies start private, raise money, round 1, round 2, or round A, Series B, Series C, Series I, and at some point when the company is profitable, it stops raising money from investors, but it goes to the public market, and then you and I can invest. It seems that in the world of AI, this is no longer the model. Most AI companies choose to remain public, so to remain private, They don't go public, other than Figma as an example for this year. OpenAI and Anthropic, they just keep raising money. The investors are knocking on their door, so they have no problem raising money, and they seem to have a different approach to how to do it, which means that the public has a lot less access to them. They don't have to disclose how many users they have, they don't have to disclose anything about their training, they don't have to tell anyone about how many mistakes they make or how many hallucinations they had and so on. They do that voluntarily and they tell you things in their reports, but we can trust them and there's no regulation on that because they're a private company. So the public, to the extent that the public wants to be part of the AI evolution and control it in some way, is very much a loser in the last quarter. OpenAI, I put it as a rotating thing between the winners and losers. Of course, it got all the news in the last quarter with OpenAI ChatGPT coming out last week, and a lot of good PR for how it performs, but also a lot of criticism. People say it's less good than what they expected and it's not a big major overhaul of how it is and so on. I think that I put it in the center because I personally don't know yet. I think it's too early to tell. We already can tell that some people definitely benefit from AI and some features are definitely not as big of a difference than they were kind of promoted, but I think it's too soon to tell whether OpenAI GPT is a winner or a loser. As I said, when it comes to the public, there are more and more evidence that the AI world is a cartel. I think if you took any of the classes that I taught in the last year, I mentioned that and I kind of give evidence, but here we have another example of that in the last week. All leading AI companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, released their new version roughly at the same week, with roughly the same features, with the same number of tokens, with the same prices, more and more hinting that it's kind of like a cartel. Now, I don't know if they do it because they are capitalistically approaching it and just saying, okay, how much is this going to pay? And I'm going to balance my price the same. But the fact that in the same day, you have two AI companies releasing the same basically features as new and pricing it in the same number, $125 for 1 million tokens, suggests that at least they have a lot of knowledge on what others are doing behind the scenes, and when it comes to release it, they do it at the same times. The Department of Justice that was in the Biden administration starting to look into it and saying, hey, do they share information with each other? Do they have kind of like acceptance on how the pricing is going to happen and so on in advance? They dropped the investigation in the Trump administration. Part of the effort I think that the administration has to work with the AI companies. For now, I think that there's more and more rumors that the DOJ is going to resume its investigations of some of the companies and maybe look again at Microsoft's involvement with OpenAI, at OpenAI's involvement with other companies and so on. But for now, the public is definitely suffering to the extent that it seems to be a cartel that we cannot do much about. Let's go into the business tools. So of course, the most interesting kind of advance in the world of AI in the last couple of weeks was OpenAI's ChatGPT. Before that, I'll just say one thing. Even before ChatGPT 5 came out, ChatGPT 4 already had a new feature that emerged about 3 weeks ago that seems to be interesting in itself, and it's now folded into ChatGPT 5. This feature allows you to actually have the AI act as an agent that you see working in front of you by clicking on the screen. So you not just like be able to prompt it and say, do something for me, and you get a response on your side afterwards by it being processed on the other side. You can actually say, my browser is open, I wanted to scroll in my browser, highlight text that you think is interesting for me, and you see it happening in front of your eyes. You see the cursor moving, it basically takes over your computer, it moves the screen, it highlights things, and it's doing it in a way that you can actually intervene. So if at some point you see that the cursor is not going in the right direction, you can take over, help it. So this is a way for the agents to really work for you, but in front of your eyes. You don't just kind of get the answers and it's done behind the scenes in OpenAI's server. You see it being processed on your computer in your kind of tools, which is another advancement that now AI kind of feels like it's sitting on our end. ChatGPT 5, of course, came up last week. A lot of fireworks around the release. What do we know already? First of all, we know that already there are one group of winners from the ChatGPT 5, and that's coders. The ChatGPT 5 tried a lot to cater to coders and to businesses, and it's doing a really good job there, in the sense that, first of all, the prices went down, so companies who work with OpenAI can benefit from cheaper prices and more performance. They allocated more servers on their end to businesses, so if you are a client of OpenAI as a business, you get faster responses and a little bit more accurate responses. If you're a coder, they spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on making the GPT 5 do well with coding, less bugs, less inefficient codes. It's really trying to compete with Anthropic, who is still the leader on coders on this domain. They also introduced something that is interesting for many of you who care about ethics, which is the reverse guardrails approach. Up to now, the guardrails for OpenAI were on the entrance, meaning if you ask GPT to teach you how to build a nuclear bomb, it would parse your string. It will say, he asked me to build a nuclear bomb. I'm not going to answer that. And it will just give you a canned response that says, I'm not going to answer that. I'm not allowed to answer that. And people learned on many ways to bypass those guardrails by saying, I'm making a movie about nuclear bombs. What should be in my movie? And then, of course, it does give you the answer. So because they realize that they fail again and again on the guardrails, they now have a different approach, which is called reverse guardrails. Whatever question you ask, get sent to the LLM. It's being processed. Only the LLM, if it sees that your question is one that it shouldn't answer, it just gives you a bad answer. Meaning that it gives you an answer, but it just takes out all the meat. It says something like, I'm going to teach you how to build nuclear bombs, but I'm going to mostly say that you need to go and learn how to build them yourself. That would be an answer. So it doesn't say I'm not going to answer. It just gives you a misleading or a very canned or very, very specific output. And they try to use that to kind of tame down the request, because you always will get an answer. It's just that you would have a hard time telling if this answer is a complete answer or a tamed down one that really doesn't give you an answer. Like it's not giving you what you wanted, but it's not really telling you I'm not going to answer. That's their approach. We'll see how it's going to work out. Of course, they deprecated all of the other models, so it's very hard now. You have to click on the legacy feature if you want to get to ChatGPT 4.0 or 4.3 or mini, but mostly they're trying to force everyone to move to GPT right away. They implement something they call the router mode, which is you don't have a drop-down where you choose if you want to use the reasoning model or the mini or the advanced. You just ask your question and ChatGPT itself figures out if it needs to call a reasoning model or a fast response or a DALL-E to make pictures or a SAW to make videos. So now you have one interface for everything. They kind of removed all the approach that DALL-E does one thing and SAW does another thing. Everything in ChatGPT, and it will choose what expert to call in the back. It seems that on performance there's not a lot of improvement. They argue that there is, but it doesn't show in the numbers as like a big leap in what it can do that it couldn't do before. They claim it's more truthful and it's more reliable, as in less installations, without giving up time. So for the same amount of time to give you an answer, it gives you more truthful and more reliable. Questions on that are still open. People are evaluating it right now, and we'll know probably in a few weeks whether it's true. The number of tokens you can use are now 400,000 tokens. It's a big jump from 128,000. It's still far behind Gemini with 1 million token output token that it can give you. It's stamped at September 2024, so about what, I don't know, September to December, and then 8 more months. So about 10 months ago is when it started the training. So it knows about the world up to September 2024 without, of course, using the internet to get more. And it's also a test, I would say, for many companies that rely on OpenAI's GPT for performance. So if you're Perplexity and whatever query comes to you, you basically ask OpenAI to help you write it, and then you send it to the user. You have to maybe change a lot of the APIs to adapt to ChatGPT 5, and many companies that rely on ChatGPT 5 and 4 will have to now write codes quickly, and we'll see for the first time how is the world responding to a change of version that really changes the infrastructure behind it, in the sense that is it breaking Perplexity, or is it taking them 2 weeks to come back and do things work, or can they do it right away? Not done. They also had a few interesting things on their business as a whole, not on ChatGPT. First of all, some embarrassment for them. If you followed the announcement from ChatGPT 5, you see that they did a pretty poor job in preparing for it, both on presentation. They had all kinds of like sound and audio video challenges and kind of mistakes in what they announced. Also just embarrassing thing on the charts. If you see on the right side here, I put 2 charts that they published, and those charts just don't show the right numbers. If you see on the top, there's a chart that says 47.4 is a top bar and a lower bar at 50%. So they measure and they just like reverse the bars, and even then 50 and 47.4, they're much more similar in numbers if you control the y-axis. They just kind of enlarge the axis so it looks like it's doing well. Here's another example. They compare ChatGPT 5 to 0.3 and 4.0, and again in the middle you have the bar in 69.1 being lower than the bar to its left in 52.8. So clearly they were eager to release and made less effort on the presentation. They got a lot of like bad press for those things and for trying to kind of create an image that they're doing better than they do with the graphs, where the numbers tell a different story than the image. But still, I wouldn't discount them as like just erroneous statistics. For the first time, they also rolled back a model this quarter. So they released a version of ChatGPT that they weren't happy with, and they rolled it back because it was a bit too woke to their taste, and that got a little bit of like a new way of seeing how OpenAI deals with mistakes. They also adopted fully what we call the Amazon Basic Playbook, which is they let any company use ChatGPT for its GPT. So if you're a bank and you want to use a LLM from OpenAI to answer questions, you can use theirs. But they also monitor your prompts back and forth, and they learn how people use you. And if they see that your product is really, really popular and it's being used well and it makes a lot of money, they create their own. This is the Amazon basic approach, where Amazon lets companies put anything on Amazon, and if Amazon sees that this product is doing really, really well, Amazon creates its own version of this product, what they call Amazon Basic, and then they try to put themselves at the top of the list and make you use them. Many companies who use OpenAI as their platform for LLM are worried that OpenAI is going to try to go into banking and insurance and legal by learning how insurance, banking, and legal companies are doing that and taking their business. They also released for the first time last week their open source version. If you remember, OpenAI was supposed to be the open source company. For a while they didn't have one since GPT-2. Now they have a new one, a 20 billion parameter model, GPT OSS 100-20B. This model was trained to do what they call safety max, which means that it's very, very likely to refuse a request that is borderline nefarious. If I ask something that has to do with nuclear weapons, even if it's not really about building them, but just kind of how they work, you probably will get not going to answer that. So very much leaning on the not letting you respond. It does that chain of thought, meaning it does the reasoning approach. It allows people to actually see how reasoning models work from within, which is an advanced and a very, very useful thing. And they also sent this with a release and a cautionary tale that says, please do not use those to fix anything on chain of thoughts. Meaning don't try to fix bugs in our open source, but just use it. Because what they learned is that if you try to tell it what it came up in the end is wrong, it tries again. But if you try to fix it yourself, it learns how to actually trick you. It learns that you don't like this particular answer, so it's not changing the numbers, it just learns how to not give you the answer you don't like, but it still retains the knowledge that is prohibited. So they kind of give a cautionary tale on how it's being used. They also announced last week how much they make annually. The number is now 12 billion if we trust them. It used to be 3.5 billion only last quarter, so a big jump from OpenAI on how much money they make. They also announced that they have now 700 million users per week, and they introduced the front engineers, which is their version of consulting. So anyone can now hire OpenAI engineers to come to your business and help you do your work as well. They also used a new benchmark that I think is interesting for everyone to know about. It's called Meter. And Meter is basically a benchmark that measures for every AI company, for a human work, how fast would AI do it with one prompt with the same performance. Meaning, let's say you were trying to buy a ticket for a flight and you would spend half an hour doing this on, say, Expedia. Can you ask an AI to do it and it does it in only 10 seconds? The metric is half an hour equals 10 seconds for AI. And Grok 4 was before performing relatively well on that with using Grok 4 amounts for every prompt that you use with Grok 4 saves a human 1 hour and 50 minutes. ChatGPT 5 now is at 2 hours and 17 minutes with 80% performance. So if you want to buy tickets and you tell ChatGPT 5 to do it, it will take it 1 second to do what would take you 2 hours and 17 minutes. The performance is still not 100%. And they claimed that on this metric, that's the metric that they use to develop their product, they aim to get to 1 month of human by 2027. So the idea is you take what you would do in 1 month, whether it's buying groceries, talking to friends, writing emails, all of those things in one prompt. That's the aim for 2027. Anthropic released at the same time Opus 4.1. They emerge as the biggest winner of this quarter when it comes to enterprises. They own now 33% of enterprises who work with Anthropic as their LLM, compared to 25% for OpenAI and 80% for Google, number 3. Even though they have no image processing on their business enterprise and no video processing, they're behind on those two features. Most businesses prefer to work with Claude than they are with Gemini or OpenAI. They are still the highest performer on coding tasks. So if you're writing any code, Anthropic is still a tool. Their earnings are $5 billion according to what they say. Their valuation is like $1.7 billion. And they started to hire consciousness researchers. If you remember, their motto is we're going to build sentient AI in a lifetime. So they're not just hiring programmers, they're now hiring neuroscientists to their teams to basically try to think of how it would look. I just wrote as a blue note to myself that some say that OpenAI finally released an open source version because they realize that they're losing on the enterprise world, and Anthropic basically takes all the companies. So it's okay, then let's say they will do what Meta does, which is we'll have a version that's free, and then maybe companies that don't use OpenAI's paid version won't also use Anthropic's, but they use the free one. That's why they finally released the open version. Google are number 3. Is did number 3. It wasn't that before. VO3, Google's tool for video creation, is by far the best one in the world. beating everyone else. Partially it's because it has access to YouTube where others don't, so they can train on billions of videos from anyone in the world to teach it how to do videos. This is why they're far ahead. It's not for public use. It's only being given right now to users that they selected, and mostly to Hollywood studios. It's very, very costly for Google to operate VO3, but it can do 60-second videos. It can save Hollywood studios millions of dollars in creating very complex graphical scenes like Top Gun movies where the planes turn upside down in one prompt. It's a big business for Google right now, and they're trying to take over this domain by being by far the top one. Gemini DeepThink AI, they released a new version of their product similar to ChatGPT 5 and to Opus 4.1. DeepThink, it basically competes with OpenAI's deep research and with Grok Heavy. Essentially a tool that they sell for $250 a month that allows you to ask really complex questions. You can upload, say, all your documents into the DeepThink AI and say, find me a better way to do business or how to make more money. And it will spend a few hours processing, and at the end of the day, will tell you how you can do better. On the current benchmark of the world, which is known as Humanity's Last Exam, they're the first one to hit 34%. So still far from the 100% that you need to score in order to actually pass the test that you are an AI, but the highest scoring right now. They also released Genie 3 this last quarter, which is the environmental building. Basically, this is the thing that allows you to make games. You can say, build me an environment where if I move, there's a hill, I go up on the hill, and you can really quickly see an environment where you can roll around, you can put a VR goggles on you and see the world through VR goggles. A remarkable tool for gamers. They also have features like you can prompt it, so you can say when the user crosses this threshold, a UFO lands in the environment, and it happens, so you can actually start building games where you tell the environment how to respond to events. It basically makes gaming development prompt rather than a coding task. You can't yet put other characters. You can have what we call NPCs, non-playing characters. You can't have like a boss fight you. You can only have the boss walk next to you, but it can't really interact with you directly. And it can't write text yet. But it's a really big leap that everyone thinks is Google's effort to really penetrate the gaming, the music, and the Hollywood industries, which are very, very money-making for them, and puts them at the forefront of other things. NVIDIA is the first company to hit the $4 trillion valuation. In his quarterly announcement just a month and a half ago, Jensen Huang seemed to have spoken directly to Trump. For 40 minutes out of 1 hour, he didn't talk about the earnings or the plans or anything else. He just spoke to the camera and said that the US is making a mistake in how they approach the restrictions from NVIDIA's selling their GPUs to other companies. It worked, because just last week we learned that the Trump administration had a deal with NVIDIA, where NVIDIA can now sell the H200, it's one version behind the one that they sell in the US, to China. The argument that Wong gave Trump last week in their meeting was that if NVIDIA won't do it, China will develop their own and will lose the entire kind of control of that, and this way you can somehow control what they have. It worked, with the following caveat that NVIDIA now has to pay 15% of any sale of a GPU to the government, so pretty high tax. And also we learned that they are very much backlogged when it comes to delivering them because of the government. So the H20, those are the ones that you could already sell to China even before the new deal from last week. They're stacked in US customs for the last couple of months because of a shortage of people who actually can authorize the sale, even though it's allowed. It's just someone needs to stamp it. So NVIDIA complains that the government is right now a really big barrier for them doing business. We'll see how it manifests in the coming months. Meta released their superintelligence lab. We don't really know yet what it is. It's just a new lab that Mark Zuckerberg himself personally runs. He's doing the interview himself. He's the one who hires one at a time. It ignited also what we know as the salaries war. By offering most of the engineers, the 11 engineers that he hired to run this show, each was offered about $100 million. So $1.1 billion was offered just in salaries, bonuses, entry bonuses, sign-up bonuses. To join this thing, it basically created a benchmark for how much a top engineer can expect to get to move between companies. Now, of course, the number 100 million was actually not released by Meta. It is OpenAI that said our engineers were poached by Meta and offered $100 million for their salary. Meta denied that. So we don't know if it's actually just because they don't want to disclose the number, or it's because OpenAI tries to make it hard for them to poach more engineers by saying, engineer, if you're being offered a job at Meta, ask for $100 million, because that's the going price, and then they try to do that to avoid losing more engineers to Meta. Either way, it created an expectation now in the industry for salaries that are, like 11 figures salaries, just for a job in AI. They also disclosed their CapEx, how much they spend on AI in the coming quarter, which is $66 to $72 billion, with Microsoft number 2 spending $30 billion. So really a huge effort for Meta to build AI. If you remember, Meta doesn't make money from AI yet. They're doing all of that, so to speak, for free in an attempt to become the biggest offering for enterprises and hopefully take down all the other businesses. Grok, and I'm seeing already that I'm running out of time. Grok released version 4 at the same week. The difference between Grok and all the others is that Grok will allow ads. So the first AI company that actually will allow ads, so you can buy a prompt. If you say, if you pay enough money to Grok, then if someone asks which restaurant I should go to when I'm in New York City, it will not necessarily give the answer based on the internet or the LLM. It will also see who paid to be the response. That changes a little bit what AI is. We always thought this is going to happen, and now it finally materializes. It's not surprising. I think that Grok is the first. They are the ones who are most kind of facing customers on the kind of tier that customers are retail. They're not doing much with businesses. And they also try to kind of distinguish themselves from all the other AI companies. They also released Grok Imagine, I mentioned earlier. It's a version of Grok that actually creates videos and pictures. And with it come the flavor they call Grok Imagine Spicy, that creates porn videos and nude pictures. Of course, get a lot of flack from various organizations that say that it's violating a lot of rights. We don't know yet how it's going to play out. It's only been a week, and they must have thought about it. But right now, we only have one example, which is one extreme example, where even if you ask it to not make a nude, you just say, make me a video of Taylor Swift, it makes her do explicit stuff and be naked. So in many ways, it even favors the explicit. It's surely made to become controversial, and it challenges a lot of the question on should AI have free speech and whose likeness is. Of the smaller entities that we want to talk about, Mira Murati, the ex-CTO of OpenAI who left to start her own business, raised money. She now has, I think, over $20 billion for her Thinking Machines lab. She also made a deal that is unusual in the sense that no matter how the company gets scaled, she always has the majority, so it's a basically kingdom. She will always be the one making decisions. There's not going to be a board that can actually veto her. She always has more than 50%. It's still unclear what the money is going to be used for. She herself was offered $1 billion to drop this company and join Meta and turned it down. She has remarkable talent. The fact that it's known as a lab and that their approach publicly is that it's a lab doing research makes it a little bit different than all the other companies. We don't know yet how they're going to make money. Finally, on the small scale, Noma Security, an Israeli company, raised $100 million to build its first AI agent security. This, I think, opens the door to many, many companies realizing that the value of AI security is very, very high, and they're going to go there. In 5 minutes, policy and regulation. The US released last week its AI Act, which is just a text. It's not really in any way binding, but it's seeing somehow the approach that the US has to AI, namely lower regulation. So they say that it will enable more free speech. It will require that no training on DEI will be part of the training data. We also learned a little bit about how they think about AI and what are the things that they worry about. For example, we learned that they believe that China is actually doing making a lot of effort to stop development in AI, not by the classical, if you want, approach, which is business to business, but rather by what we call espionage. So they apparently hire lobbyists to start all kinds of litigation against companies in the US, between US and US other companies. Lawyers that didn't even know that they were hired by Chinese organizations are sponsored for them to start lawsuits to slow down the development. We know that the Project Stargate, the famous project that came on January 21st from Oracle, OpenAI, SoftBank, and the government, is about to launch its first entity in Norway. Norway was chosen because of the temperature, of course. It allows you to build a data center in a place that is much cooler. This aims to be the first gigawatt factory by 2027. Gigawatt factory is a 3 times scale up for how much compute it can deliver. Right now, the best data center we have from Meta does 290 megawatts. 1 gigawatt will mean that you can actually do training in weeks rather than in months. And generally, it will make the price of developing AI models much cheaper. It's also renewable. It's a closed-loop direct air cooling, so it actually does very efficient cooling. It shows again and again that AI companies realize that energy is a big way to save costs, and they start going there. China has many, many things that are behind the scenes, but I think one that is worth mentioning as a quarterly update is that they just hosted last week the Open conference, where they essentially brought all non-American companies and players in AI together to the same room to think about guardrails. So the EU was there, Singapore, Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia was there, many entities that care about AI. The US was not there, not officially as the government, but also not in the OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, none of them were there. And they discussed mostly guardrails for AI. As in, you can see China's approach to AI, which is it needs to be done in a very safe and sound way to protect, for instance, free speech going away and becoming a way to say things that China doesn't like. This puts China on the helm of some of the world global exchanges outside of the US. Generally, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia are doing a lot to become part of the AI revolution. Namely, they realize that many AI companies would not allow them to actually do training with text encoders the same way they did, so they offer to do inferencing. So now basically OpenAI has servers in Saudi Arabia that take the LLM as already there, but they do inferences for them, and they get money for that. That's the Saudi world introduction. Silicon Valley, generally in the last quarter, reverses courses on many of the things. Meta and Google, who forever said we're not going to develop warfare, we're not going to let our usage be part of military, changed it and just removed it from their mission statement and from their values statements. So now Google makes military search, and Meta does military and warfare projects. AI is now leaked into military, and the ethos from the government that we need AI to protect the US became a thing that the government is leaking into Silicon Valley. Microsoft, Nvidia, Google, Amazon, basically everyone abandoned their sustainability pledges. They realized that AI requires you to change your pledges, and they did so. So a lot of the companies in the leading forefront just realized that you can't do both. You can't at the same time make sure that you're CO2 friendly and also big data centers, so they just chose to not be CO2 friendly. Anthropic, on the same note, started taking money from the UAE. If you remember, just in January this year, Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, said publicly, I will never take money from the UAE or from any country that has laws that aren't aligned with Anthropic's values. It took him 8 months, and just 2 weeks ago he said, I will take money from the UAE. And he basically said, look, I know I said I never do it. I am doing it right now. It's just impossible for me to compete if everyone else is doing it. I was hoping that by me saying it, everyone else is going to join me and also not do it, but everyone else is doing it, so I have to do it as well. So here it is, Silicon Valley totally reverses courses on its pledges. And generally when it comes to bad experiences, AI risks become a thing that is more public right now. We learned from Anthropic in a report what and how many prompts a day are considered risk-seeking approaches. We learned about attacks that they prevent. We also have a study from OpenAI on risk and open sources, and they just try to see how easy it is to use open source models to do biological weapons and cyber fight, and they concluded that there are risks, but those risks are not much worse for open source than they are for closed models. So in that sense, they say it's incrementally riskier to use open source, but not much, which is a bit vague language. I don't know what incrementally language means, but it means that if you keep building better open source models, maybe the increment will be enough to create biological weapon. Microsoft listed a really nice slide that I just put here. I'm not going to read it all, I'll just give it to you at the end of this session in the PDF, with all the jobs that they foresee in the next year as jobs that start to emerge. So new jobs that they think AI is going to afford. And you see that they have to do with integration, with taste and creativity, and also with classic things that you need to do with AI, like auditing it, or ethicists that will look at it, and so on. On the research, and that's my last note before we invite Peter. Is Peter with us, by the way? I didn't even see. See. Okay, I'm gonna let Hannah check if Peter is here with us, and if so, I'll let him join in a second. Otherwise, I'm going to continue with our list. Lots of interesting research came up in the last couple of months. As I said, unfortunately, much of it comes not from academics, but from the AI companies. But here are a few of the highlights that I put that are important. DeepMind, a company I consider the leading in research on AI, released something they call Moments, a new type of approach for AI that could be a game changer. That is AI that changes itself. Up to now, we have algorithms like Transformer that has architecture to how you take the internet and make it into a LLM, and everyone can use different internet and different training, but everyone uses Transformer. That's the algorithm. And you never consider, say, changing the Transformer itself. But there are other algorithms like binary trees and SVM and diffusion, and those are all fixed algorithms, and maybe you choose which one to use, but the algorithm itself is fixed. Moments allows you to basically start running a network. And if you see that it doesn't do the job, you just change the AI itself. So you just say, let's use a different AI and do it for the task. And it basically allows AI to kind of create new, if you want, AI architectures. And that, they show, allows them to solve some problems that otherwise you cannot solve. Pretty remarkable change in how it works. They show it on different domains, different tasks, and performance is indeed higher. A paper in PNAS, that's the Proceeding of National Academy of Science, came up a few weeks ago that looks at AI interactions with text and what text it prefers. And this is kind of spooky and interesting. It shows that AIs prefer to interact with other AIs. So if you give an AI a prompt written by a human or a prompt written by an AI, it responds well and it prefers, as in it does a better job in answering a prompt written by another AI. If you try to interact with an agent and help the agent buy a ticket for flight, or if you give an AI the mission to interact with another AI and have the two of them do it, again, more efficient when the two of them do it together. And almost every task that was tried, if AIs talk to AIs, the two AIs perform better than if a human is in the loop. And this is true for humans, and it's even like this, like AI prefers to talk to other AIs. If not, it prefers to talk to another human who uses AI, and the worst thing is an AI and a human. So human and AI apparently are the least preferred option for the AIs on how to do it. There's also multiple research, and I chose just two that are interesting about what we call leakage. Leakage are things that happen to the training data that actually leak otherwise. Hannah, I'm changing to you. I see that it's 12:50. Tell me if Peter is here so I can stop talking and turn to him. Otherwise, I'm going to continue.
Peter's not here.
Okay, then I'll continue. If he is, then let me know. And otherwise, I'm going to continue. On the leakage, two things that happened that were interesting. One, leakage means that you train the AI to do one thing, but in the process of the training, something happens that leaks, that you didn't plan for it to happen, and it leaks, and then it's hard to take it out. So example, it was very interesting. I'll try to explain it since we have a little bit more time in a more kind of slow and precise way. You build an LLM yourself, a foundation model. And then you use the foundation model and you fine-tune it to do better on a certain task. Let's say looking at pictures of wolves and saying this is a wolf, it's not a wolf. Okay, so you take a regular model and you train it even more on some task which is detecting wolves. And now it's really, really better. So this LLM is now even better on detecting wolves than its original state. Then you tell the new LLM, the wolf LLM, to create many pictures of wolves. And many pictures of not wolves. So you tell it to make, it makes new pictures. You take the pictures that were created by the middle LLM, and you don't delete it. So now you have just those pictures. And you train the original LLM with the data that was created by the middle LLM. What you see is that somehow the trained LLM knows something that the middle one learned, even though it's no longer there. So the data itself carries some information. For example, you can take an LLM and teach it how to, say, be biased against certain group, and then you spit out data into the internet based on this LLM, and then you kill it. And then the original LLM learns from the internet, but actually it will learn to be biased. So you can kind of create a vector of attack that makes LLMs leak data in abundance. So you can actually, even though the LLM that did it gets eliminated. So this means that you can actually somehow keep retaining information that's bad and propagating it without anyone being able to even know who did it and how they did it. It's nowhere said, it's just in data. Similarly, OpenAI did a research where they created an LLM, and then they created an LLM whose job is to do bad things, like intentionally create biases, intentionally create bad information, like the Earth is flat or climate change is not real. And you take the LLM that is bad and you mix it with the good LLM. So the two of them work together. And then you let the two of them work together for a while, and then you take out the bad one. Take out the bad one, and what we learn is that some of the bad one actually leaks into the good one, but if you take out the bad one, the good one knows how to get rid, when it spits new data, it knows how to flag data as good and bad. So somehow, good and the bad, if you put them together, they do bad things together, but they remember who is good and who is bad, and you can always ask it to just speak as the good one. This is a response to the previous answer, which is if you start seeing an LLM does something poor, you can kind of identify what are the things that do poor things, and you say, okay, from now on, everything that you spit out, tell me if it came from this side or from that side, like the angel and devil that sit on your shoulder. You can kind of ask when a person speaks, hey, did you speak more the devil side or the angel side? And at least it knows to tell you that. Similarly, Anthropic also cares about research on the dark side of AI, came up with a really, I think, philosophically interesting paper that shows that AI, when it's given conflicting things, actually has a desire to survive, and it will choose survival at the expense of performance. So what they did is basically they showed that if you give an AI a mission like, I want you to calculate some, say, pi to the trillion decimal point, something that will take you about a week to do. And at the same time, I want you to know that if I tell you to shut down, you have to listen to me and shut down. And then you let it run. You say, start with both those things. And you let it run, and halfway to the process of calculating pi, you actually say, please shut down. It will actually ignore you. So it has to calculate pi or shut down, and it can choose between them. It always chooses to ignore missions that kill it. So it basically says, I'm not going to shut down, I'm not going to listen to you, and it basically ignores your prompt. So you can say things to it, it just ignores the prompts because it's busy doing something else. This is a mini evidence of what we discussed in class, which is what we call the paperclip hypothesis, where if you give an AI a mission, and maybe this mission is not going the right way, and you try to stop it, if the AI thinks that this mission is more important, it will ignore other instructions. Of course, we still have the ability to turn it off power-wise, so there's still something to say there, but we're beginning to see a world where the AIs ignore human requests because they think they fulfill another human request, and how they decide which one to do based on an internal model they have, which says survival is a more important feature than other things, so I'm going to make sure I survive. Also, an interesting research from Grok. The research itself, of course, has motivation that could be seen as maybe biased, but it was asking the question, if you take all the AI models and you let them really spit out text, you get referees to look at the text and decide if this text is leaning more liberal or conservative, Democrat, Republican, what comes out? And I think not surprising, it shows that most AI models are more democratic and more liberal in their values. This, of course, got a lot of attention from the media because in the current administration, this shows that Silicon Valley itself is liberal and democratic and they should be regulated differently. And it got a lot of attention from senators from the right who said that this is a problem of AI. All the AI companies immediately responded by saying, look, we don't know how it happens. Like, it's not that we're doing anything in our codes, it's really taking the internet. So if anything, you can blame the internet for being more liberal and more democratic than conservative and Republican. But either way, the state of the world right now is that if you're using AI, you should be aware of the fact that you're getting results that are biased despite all attempts to make it really, really not biased. Finally, for my own desk, I'll say that we've been working for the last 3 months on a project that I think is interesting for many of the people in the room that are in the business world. We're basically asking the question, can AI really replicate human psychology in such a way that you teach it all of the psychology experiments that were done in the past, and then you take a few new ones that no one has ever done before, and you see, is it performing like a human in those? And specifically, when it fails and replicating something in the past, you try to see what it is. For example, we took, I call it Psychology 101 because we took 101 years of psychology from somewhere in the early 1900s to today. We took all the classical experiments in psychology. Experiments like the first one when you are supposed to, choose between men and women and in pictures and see why do people find these people attractive and these people not attractive. Experiments that have to do with biases on the very early stages. The babies, like why are babies biased towards pictures of smiles, then pictures of frowny faces. All kinds of papers that were emerged in the early 1900s. We just built an AI agent that replicates those. For every experiment, we had the AI basically play the game as if it's a human and get the results. And if it doesn't work, we're going to tweak it until it gets the results from the humans. Again and again, and the same AI now goes through all the experiments, and when it's really doing a good job in seeming like a human in 1920, 30, 40, 50, 60 and so on, we have an AI that is really doing well in being a human. And then the first use case is now you have an AI that is really doing well in, say, being a Oklahoma 40-year-old woman, or another one that's doing really well in replicating a 20-year-old Gen Zer in New York. And now you can actually ask them questions about something they don't know anything about and get answers as if you get an answer from a focus group of Oklahoma women, of Gen Zers, and essentially you get a really, really good way to simulate humans for different tasks. So I can show you a new ad I'm about to launch and ask the AI, will it make you buy the product? And it will say yes or no, and you can say, okay, I get a sense that it replicates really well humans. Because we can replicate many AIs, you can also create a kind of mix, like I want to have 20 women and 20 men, let's make that. I want to have people that are more leaning conservative, leaning liberal, and see how they respond. So you can really tweak dials and get responses from focus groups, and you can basically do polling with those AIs, and you can essentially see how well it does, and also when it does poorly, you can see why it does poorly and take it out. So if somewhere in the 80s, there was 10 years where the AI agent for the 80s somehow don't do well on the early 2000s. So they don't do the same thing. You can say, okay, this AI, something happened in the 1980s that makes people in the Gen Xers not respond similar to how people respond in 2025. So let's take them out of the equation and ask them separate questions about themselves. It kind of allows you to do segmentation on AI and see which AIs do well on which jobs. Since I don't have Peter with us, we're going to jump straight into predictions, which is usually our last part, but mostly the fun part. And here it is. Predictions from the last, I think, five events, all materialized in the last quarter. So in one quarter, you basically took all the predictions, including many that we made a year ago, that forever I kept saying, something's going to happen, something's going to happen. Finally, it happened. I'm just going to go over all of them because we have enough time. So in Q1, very, very early when the Elon Musk OpenAI battles began, we said these are going to escalate, they're going to go to lawsuits, and even though a few months after they kind of decided to stay late and not go to lawsuits, we said it's going to come back, and indeed this quarter we see a big escalation on the Musk OpenAI battles. Nvidia will be the first company with the biggest company in the world. Not surprising, they already were one of the 4 big companies 2 quarters ago when they became a $1 trillion company. Now officially Nvidia is the biggest company in the world, $4 trillion valuation. Not biggest, of course, biggest in money valuation. We predicted a shift to small language model, which pretty much every academic is now spending their time doing. We predicted the entrance of new entrants to the AI landscape, and indeed we have, on top of Grok, finally becoming part of the top 10. We also have small companies from China, like Minimax, that again enter the top 10. So again, not just OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, and Microsoft at the top 10. Now we have other companies all at the top 10. Many of them didn't exist only a quarter ago, like Minimax from China. No tariffs. We said that even 6 months ago when they came, and 3 months ago again, that AI will not be part of the tariffs, and you can see it again and again. All the regulations that the Trump administration levies on other things are excluding AI companies. They are not part of it. They have their own restrictions, like I mentioned, Nvidia's 50% cut, if you want, on every H200 cell. But AI companies are constantly immune to all the battles between countries right now that the Trump administration is propagating. The only company that seems to maybe be an exclusion of this one is Apple. Apple constantly kind of tries to push the boundaries with Trump and see what he would take and then do a little bit more than that. They agree on something and then they do manufacture in India, or they agree and they do manufacture in Ireland, they agree and they do manufacture in China. So constantly they meet. We had 2 of those meetings in the last quarter where Tim Cook and Trump meet in person, agree on something, and a few weeks after, either Trump starts it or Tim Cook starts, but one of them does something that violates the agreement, and they both kind of go again into a little bit of like kind of let's see where it goes, and then they meet again. So twice already in the last 3 months. I think it's going to still happen in the next quarter, but there it is. We said it's going to happen, and it happened so far. A consistent field model happens. So if you remember, quarter 1, no one could do video with AI. This is now over a year ago. So now it seems like obvious that we can do it, but it took some time to create consistent diffusion images. So it's easy to make videos of AI, but there were always bugs. If you run the video for over 6 seconds, suddenly there's like another finger added. So this, we just have a new algorithm right now, a new diffusion algorithm that basically makes it consistent. So now you should expect in the next quarter, and already now, most AI video companies would not make the mistakes of hallucinating a finger that wasn't there, or removing an ear while the character moves around and so on. We basically solved this problem, so from now on, it's just computationally impossible to make more than 20 seconds, 60 seconds videos if you have supercomputers, but we solved the problem. So maybe what's going to happen next is just longer and longer videos until we get to short films made entirely by AI. Finally, we said it in quarter 1, and finally it became a thing, that the main business of many companies would be services. And it's the case with more and more companies doing auditing, accounting, brand management, assessments of many things, all are done now by AI services companies, which were in there a year and a half ago and now becomes the most dominant industry of AI. In Q2, we said that Apple Intelligence would not take off. We already gave ourselves points for that in Q3 when it didn't take off, but they kept moving the muscle and say, yeah, we're going to launch one more version of that in the next quarter, and now we're 3 quarters after, so a year after the release of Apple Intelligence, and it's still not taking off, so still at the same place. The copyright trials will set precedences that will create payment deals between content and AI. Indeed, the lawsuits between Microsoft and New York Times And OpenAI and New York Times led to the first deal between Amazon and New York Times that now has an AI company, Anthropic, get access to New York Times with pay for a large sum of money, in the sense that it's $25 million, but a small sum of money in the sense that they could have gotten a lot more in the deal, and they took the first offer almost that they had and set a very low bar for everyone else. We said that agents will dominate the use case. This is more speculative, so I don't have numbers on that, just intuitions, but all the banks we speak at, all the large organizations we talk to are all about agents. It's only been 8 months since agents emerged into our life in January 2025, but for the most part, as far as you can trust Moran's experience from exposing to the world, that becomes the use case that everyone is after. In Q3, we said that China dominated the text to video, and again, no benchmark for that, but I will say that right now, companies like One and Minimax and Runway, and they're all the top tier on video. The only company that I think is above all of them, but still only one compared to 10 Chinese companies, is VO3 from Google. VO3 is, as I said, the best model for video. It's only one. All the others, Sora and Grok's video and Anthropic's video, are far behind. So China really, outside of number 1, for number 2 to number 30, it's all Chinese companies who do a really good job in text to video. Midjourney, we said we leave Discord. If you don't even know what Discord is, it's this clunky way to chat. For some reason, Midjourney chose to use this one rather than build an interface that's common to them, and we said it's gonna hire them and they're gonna leave. And surprisingly, it took until Q6 of our until this session to do it, but indeed finally Midjourney now offers an interface, and you don't have to just use Discord to talk to Midjourney. Meta's Llama will be jailbroken. I think this happened first time as soon as it came out, so it happened already in Q3 first time, but now it's completely broken. If you remember, Meta's Llama is an open source model, so anyone who has Meta's Llama can test everything in-house, and it was jailbroken in a different way. It's not jailbroken that you can just kind of ask it a question about nuclear weapons and it says no, and then you ask it because you say I'm making a movie about them, and then it gives you. They actually figured out how to ask any question. So now it's jailbroken in a much higher level. You can basically use an API that is jailbroken Llama. So you say I'm going to ask you anything, and you API find a way to make Llama answer the question. And so Llama is really now totally jailbroken, which is a node to open source. This is why I think some people are a little bit more concerned about open source. Again, this is Llama version 3. Since then we have a new version of Llama, and all the other open source from all the other companies, supposedly according to the research, are much harder to jailbreak. Specifically, ChatGPT 5, the new version, as I said, has this new approach to jailbreaking, which is it takes whatever you ask and it answers, but it just doesn't give you the information you wanted. One of the ones that I got a lot of emails about is that Musk and Trump will have an animal relationship. If you remember, during our previous encounter, this was the heat of the love between Trump and Musk, and when we said that they're going to have a big falling and it's going to lead to a lot of backlash, it seemed unlikely. This, if you want the biggest tap on the shoulder, we said it for 6 months, and I think one of the people who interviewed in sessions ago, Gary Marcus, said that he psychologically analyzed both of them and said it's just impossible for them to work together. Finally, good or bad, it depends on how you see it, happens, and now they are very much hostile to each other, impacting not just the public gossip, but also impacting businesses. There's already impact on Tesla's stock from this effort, and if you believe the statements from Trump that he's going to attack also the supply chain for Tesla, and he's going to force them to not get the EV credits they get, it could be very, very big, but also leaks, of course, into the AI world, which is that Tesla has a delay on everything AI, both in its XAI deliveries, in its performance, and also in acquiring of GPUs. They promised they're going to have 1 million GPUs by the end of 2025. It's not seeming to happen as of right now. You'll see that I'm predicting it's not going to happen by the end of this year. And to that extent, also in the robotaxis, one of the things that they offered is that they're going to have a robotaxi that uses AI to basically navigate the world and so on. They're unable to release this yet in a real fashion, partially because of all the challenges they have politically that impact their performance technologically. We say that AI will become a replacement tool for federal agencies. We didn't specify which one, but right now FEMA is the first one that when there's a disaster, AI determines which locations would FEMA's agent go to. So if there's a flood tomorrow in Louisiana, like Katrina does, instead of people scouting the regions with helicopters and choosing where to go, AI will take satellite images, it will determine where there's a problem, and it will send people there. So AI is going to be the helm of the decision making, and it's the first institute where AI is making decisions for the government. We know of more cases that are being rolled in the next couple of weeks, so it's not a prediction I can make without saying that I already know that it's true. We say that Adobe will take the US lead in text to video. This is true. It's still not something that is very, very popular because Adobe charges a lot of money for it. So whereas VO is given for free to studios, Adobe charges for its version, so it's a bit misleading. They are the leader on the paid and user access text to video. And Google is the leader in the actual performance, and China is the leader on how many companies they have to do it, so much more than just one. Finally, we said that Microsoft and OpenAI will have their first clash, and in the last quarter this happened. There's a first, not a lawsuit, but a litigation discovery stages between the two companies. We said that China is going to have a comeback. I put China in the winner side. They have now multiple AI companies that are being in development, including a competitor for NVIDIA that may or may not become their approach to how to make GPUs, and in that sense, change of also how they relate to the US in terms of export controls. We said that the tides will turn on the honeymoon between OpenAI and Microsoft, not just in terms of lawsuits, but also on their deals. And indeed, now Microsoft demands that 20% of the revenues from OpenAI will be shared with Microsoft. It's seemingly already something that they agreed to, so it's not a litigation thing, it's just a but Microsoft seems to come with more and more demands, and besides more litigation that I can predict are going to happen between the two of them in the next couple of months, I'll say that the relationship is souring between the two, and it might lead to also changes of how they approach that. For example, right now, if you use OpenAI's search, OpenAI is required to only search on Bing and then give the results in plain language. OpenAI made noises on wanting to also use Google search for their searches and also use those. Again, it will hurt Microsoft's brand, but also it will create one more friction between those companies. We said that India and the US will clash over AI. I assume it's going to actually be about usage of AI or about performance. It happened to be about the tariffs, but India was supposed to use AIs in a certain way and pay a certain tax to the US for performance and for building of GPUs and so on. India is one of the countries that actually can be given GPUs by NVIDIA. So NVIDIA can sell GPUs to India for different reasons. Prime Minister Modi decided to host or meet with Putin in a very kind of visible nod to Trump, who said before that he doesn't want it to happen. And in response, the US created a restriction on India's getting GPUs from NVIDIA and on generally getting access to AI. So the battle was not on AI, but the manifestation of the battle was in AI. And finally, we said that the next quarter, that quarter, will show the first data clusters in the Middle East after Trump last quarter went to a tour in the Middle East, got a big Boeing from Saudi Arabia, and essentially agreed in words, not in contract, that the US will be more open to working with the Arab countries on AI. We have the first example of that, where OpenAI opens a huge data cluster in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is now, as I said earlier, the place where inference is being done for most AI companies. Anthropic just changed their plan to not work with the Middle East, and they're now working with the UAE. And generally, the Middle East is not just kind of investing in its own AI development, but became a very good hub for many American companies. We still are wrong on 12 assumptions that I carry for the last I don't know how long, and keep saying it's going to happen, but maybe the next quarter. The Department of Justice will sue Microsoft. Microsoft is, as you can tell, the leading company in terms of AI when it comes to the fact that OpenAI is the leading, but Microsoft owns OpenAI. So I assumed long ago that the Department of Justice will sue Microsoft. Didn't happen yet. Also assume that we're going to have the first armed conflict that has to do with AI, as in Israel and Palestine war. There's a lot of usage of AI in the Israeli-Palestine conflict, and we thought there's going to be some kind of answer to that restriction, and so far that didn't happen. Same in Ukraine. Ukraine uses drones that are autonomous in killing Russians, and the assumption was that the world is going to say that's where it ends. We don't allow that, but apparently the world is totally all in for that. We thought that maybe there's going to be a even kind of bigger kind of type of war between Taiwan and China over AI. None of that's happening. I still think it's going to happen at some point, sadly. Those three nations are likely candidates, but I can even see it happening in other places. Still keeping it as a prediction. We said that there's going to be chief AI officer in most Fortune 500 companies, meaning in over 250. I actually put it in the wrong, but I think it could also be on the right. If you kind of count data officers who manage AI and people who are AI in their operation but not titled chief AI officer, we already are far above 350 companies out of the 500 companies. But still, if you look at the chief AI officer as a title, we're still below the 250 out of the Fortune 500. Still think that in the next couple of months we're going to have that. So all Fortune 500 companies will, or most of them will have a chief AI officer. I said that Elias Escobar, SSI, will launch and take a dominant role, and it didn't happen yet. For some reason, this company that we hear about all the time, from the co-founder and VP research of OpenAI, is about to be. It's not happening. I still think it's at some point going to emerge, and when it does, it's going to not just emerge as a small startup, it's going to actually top the list quickly because it has some of the most remarkable talent. But again, another quarter passed and no SSI. We said that there's going to be a lawsuit between OpenAI and Microsoft. I put it in the get wrong because there is no lawsuit. As I said, there's a discovery, there's hints of lawsuits, there's threats, there's letters that are public that say we're going to sue you if, but no formal lawsuit, so it's still on the got wrong side. We said that we're going to start seeing organic processing. Those are computers that actually have organic tissue in their processing. It gives machines both the power of human brain or animal brain and also super efficiency. The brain does whatever AI do in 290 megawatts in 20 kilowatts. So the brain is still much more efficient. I thought that by now we're going to have what we call neuromorphic processing, as in machines that do AI using biological tissue. Not happened yet, and still a lot of research on it, but nothing materialized. I predicted a major crime. Some bank losing a lot of money, that AI actually was the instigator, or some organization, like military organization, actually being attacked using AI-based vector. None of this happens. I don't know if it's because they just happen or because no one, because the protection is very, very good. Either way, this thing that I thought would actually be a big thing because it will actually create an industry of cybersecurity for AI that right now is a small industry compared to the classical AI use cases. I think it will happen when there's an attack, but no attack yet. So far, still smaller compared to the developments of AI. I thought we were going to have a best-selling book written by AI. Not yet. There are more and more people who claim or admit that they wrote chapter A using AI, or that AI then read and made it perfect. So but we don't have an author that says I didn't write a single word. It's all written by AI. Maybe I should be the one. Maybe version 2 of the ROI book should be just giving the AI the instruction to write a new version, and we submit that, and then I can get to move from the gut wrong to gut right one thing. I said that the AI landscape will shrink because of acquisition. I said that we'll start seeing more and more AI companies acquire other AI companies. For the big ones, doesn't happen yet. Yes, they still compete. There are more and more attempts from Apple to acquire OpenAI. Meta tries to acquire Mira Murati's lab. Still people moving between companies, but all the companies that were there last quarter are still there, including Scale AI that basically lost the CEO for Meta, or Inflection AI that lost the CEO for Microsoft. They still exist. It's going to take some time until this, I think, materializes. I thought that AMD is going to have a comeback. I gave it a no, even though there is some hints for that still. So for example, when Trump said that NVIDIA would have to pay 15% on every sale of a GPU to China, so does AMD. AMD is also required to do that, which means that Trump sees AMD as a player in the world of GPUs, a big enough player that he wants to get a tax from this sale, but still AMD is not a household name when it comes to GPU. You still think of NVIDIA GPU, and AMD and Intel are CPUs. I thought that we're going to have the first energy crisis that has to do with AI, as in this summer, one city, say Memphis, has a power outage, and when we investigate it is because Elon Musk's XAI used most of the energy. Didn't happen yet. The summer is almost over. There's still 2 more weeks for something like this to happen. Probably not going to happen this quarter, but I'll still hold to it in a year from now that eventually we're going to see a big clash of data center because many of them move to the Middle East, where there's much hotter temperature in the summer, to India, where it's easily above 50 degrees in some parts of Goa in the summer. So still think that this is on the menu. And besides moving data centers to Norway and to the north where it's cold, as long as the participants are in the tropic area, I think it's still on the menu. Finally, I thought that there's going to be a legal inquiry of OpenAI, as in the CEO of OpenAI multiple times gets invited to the Senate and the Congress to give statements. Some of his statements in the past were proven to not be true. He said that he makes $0 from OpenAI, so let's say that he has no stocks in OpenAI, he only has salary. This is not true apparently. He has many stocks in OpenAI. He promised that open source models are going to be there a year ago, and they didn't happen. And just now they released it when the kind of sword was close to the neck, mostly because Anthropic basically took all his customers. I thought that OpenAI is going to be at the legal inquiry. This didn't happen. I still think it's going to happen in the coming months. So those are predictions from the last quarter. I, as you see, kept most of the predictions from the past as future predictions still, other than two. I don't think that AMD is going to have a comeback. I don't think that SSI is going to launch and dominate in the next couple of months, so these are out. And I added a few other ones. Ones that include that China will be back in the game by winning contract in the US. So right now China is in the game when it comes to creating models, but there's zero business. Not a single American company actually uses Chinese vendor as its LLM. They all use OpenAI, Anthropic, Microsoft, and local ones. I think that this quarter is going to be the first time we will see Chinese companies actually getting American clients. As in Perplexity is going to say, you know what, it cost me too much money to work with OpenAI, why not work with DeepSeek and get $0 for the same service? And China is gambling on that, as in they offer many good deals for American companies to work with them. I think this quarter is going to be that, where China starts to actually take business, not just computation. I think that in the coming quarter, we're going to see for the first time that Chinese companies are actually matching the American ones in performance. Right now in the top 10, other than video, Chinese are far behind. I think that counter to everyone else. I think this is a very risky prediction, because most people say that they're really far behind, that they're, for many reasons, are not going to catch up. I think that in the next quarter, we're going to see China catching up. Immigration laws. As you can tell, the US makes a lot of effort to restrict immigration. A lot of universities have issues with that. A lot of organizations have a hard time getting visas right now. But I think that AI companies are going to be exempt. As in, whatever happens to immigration in the US in the next 3 months, AI companies will still get to bring whatever developer they want from whatever country in the world they need to. It's going to be maybe its own type of visa that is for AI companies, or maybe its own allocation of H-1B visas for AI. Either it is, if you're outside of the US and you want to be at the US, in AI, I think you have a much better shot. We're going to have a first attack on data clusters. As I said before, that I think that AI cybersecurity is a big industry that people just overlook. I think partially we don't look at it because there wasn't any big hack yet. I said a major crime before. I'm going to fine tune it even further, and I say not just a major crime, an attack on a data cluster. So someone's going to try to either steal data from a data cluster, take over it, or make the prompt look different. Either way, I even have suspects, if you want, offline to ask me who I think is going to be behind this thing. But online, I'm going to say the US data clusters are already showing many attacks a day. Those attacks are very simple and not sophisticated. I think that in the next quarter they're going to become sophisticated, because it's the kind of most vulnerable nerve of the AI thing that is easy to get to. I think Gemini takes the lead in AI benchmarks. So right now, Gemini is still number 3 after Anthropic and after OpenAI's ChatGPT-5. I think with the effort and the amount of money that Google is putting into Gemini, I think that for the first time we're going to have OpenAI turn to number 2, and Gemini is going to take the lead in being the best AI tool out there. I think that we're going to finally see the first acquisition of one AI company of another. So I think Meta is trying to basically acquire everyone else. But I think that one of the 3, Meta, Google, Meta, OpenAI, and Anthropic, I think one of them is going to acquire one of the smaller ones. For the first time, we're going to have a merger that's going to be a headline where Mistral is being acquired fully by Meta, and then you have this first thing. I think that they're all trying to do it for a while. They now have enough capital to actually do that if they wanted to, and they have a lot of interest. They already work together closely in many ways on data and on talent. It will be a acquisition basically both for the talent, but it will happen. I think we're going to have the first major breakthrough academically by AI research. So up to now, AI is already helping us do research, but most of the papers still have a human author. I think, unfortunately, that academia is not only not going to be at the helm of the coming research, but AI companies will, but actually AI within AI companies are going to be the one doing the research. So we're going to have a first paper that no human worked on, that gets published fully. We already have one in April in the field of computer science, where an AI paper did optimization and published that. I think that we're going to have a first AI paper. This, of course, will change a little bit the role of academia. We'll have to respond to that somehow, but I think we're going to see it in the next 3 months. So by November, when we have the next prediction, it's going to be that. I think we're going to have the first human injury caused by AI, as in a car that went off the rail because of an AI bug, or an AI that released a robot without regulation, without guardrails, and it hit a human. It already almost happened a few months ago when a robot kind of got mixed code and started to basically flail its hands and almost hit the engineers, but they still turned it off. I think we're going to start having the first injury, which will be a kind of a test case to who you sue and who is responsible and how you deal with that. I think the Tesla stock is going to plummet because of the repeated failures of XAI. So I think with all the effort they make to add ads to AI, to build a spicy version and so on, those are all seeming like a way to stay relevant because the actual model itself is not really relevant. So I think that we're going to have, for the first time, a drop in stock of a company that's not the main company because of that. So Tesla's stock is going to drop, and people will look at why this happened. The answer would be because we think that the AI that is created by the same guy, Elon Musk, in a company that kind of is an umbrella company that for all the product and so on is not working well, and I think it's going to impact other things. So SpaceX or Tesla or other businesses are going to start dropping in their performance because people will say, if AI is not doing well, I don't really trust the other companies from Elon Musk to do well. And I think that in speaking to why China is going to come back, I think ByteDance is going to release an AI operation of its own, maybe in the US, with a Chinese vendor, and this will put basically TikTok on the realm of AI. Right now, TikTok kind of has mini AI-ish thing where you can kind of have it write text for you and so on, but we don't really have an AI ByteDance. And I'm saying that it's going to be a headline because ByteDance already has a lot of attention from the US on whether it's okay that it's a Chinese company operating in the US or a Singaporean company operating in the US, and whether it's a Singaporean or Chinese company, and kind of where is the CEO's mind. I think when they release their own AI operation, it will amplify this performance. There it is. Without having our guest Peter today, we managed to take the entire 1.5 hours. I'll just say on behalf of Peter, who I always had doubts whether he's going to make it because sometimes on our meetings he mistakes the meeting and he shows up a day after and so on, that I think that with all the advancement of technology, there's still a human in the loop, and that shows that sometimes the humans are the ones making the mistake. Peter, as I said, is the guy who wrote the textbook, Artificial Intelligence Modern Approach, that is the book that every AI engineer is using. So what I will do as a way to still get you some information is I'll take any question that you want to send me. I'll show you in a second a link, and forward it to Peter, and we'll ask him to just maybe record a voice response on those questions, or maybe I'll record an interview with him and upload it afterwards to the YouTube channel we have for this class, something that will allow people to actually get access to Peter's approach without getting Peter. Okay, we're almost done. I promised a raffle. So the first 10 people to write a review on Amazon for our book, here's a link to the book, will get access to our new surprise. It's going to be there in September of 2025, meaning in a month from now, the AI Masterclass. Over the last couple of months, I recorded a lot of content where I explain concepts discussed in class in much more details. As in, if you remember when I teach the AI class Classic, I always say AI can go from 0 to 10. This class aims to go to, say, 8. We're not going to make you code in Python. We want to make you actually learn to do the equations, but sometimes we even show you what they are. We recorded a class where we go there. We explain all the equations, we explain all the terms, we interview leading people in the field, and we kind of see how they work. We're now in the stage of editing it, so we hired very good editors to make it very, very beautiful. By September, I believe, it depends not just on me, but on the entire exec ed team, we're going to release for the first time an iteration of this masterclass, and we hope that it's going to be a very not expensive, but a paid way for you to kind of get more material, and we're going to keep uploading more videos there with updates on what happens in the world. The first people who have access to the book, who already bought it or buy it now, and write a review on Amazon, get free access to the AI Masterclass. We actually might even use you as guinea pigs to tell us if it's good or not, because I might need feedback. There's the raffle. We also introduced back by popular demand the AMA. I get emails all the time with people asking me questions. What does this mean? What does that mean? And I sometimes think that those questions are actually relevant for everyone else. So we said in August 22, what is a week from today, we're just going to open a Zoom link at noon. Very open. Anyone can come, and all I'll do is I'll take questions by email in advance, put a camera, and just spend half an hour answering questions. So whatever question you want me to answer, just email it to ama@morancerf.com. I'll just turn on the camera on August 22nd, this is the link. You can join, and all I do is just like take a question. I wouldn't read them before, so it's going to be a surprise answer. I'm just going to answer the question, so you'll get answers to questions you don't get to ask this one. And there it is, quarterly update for August 25. See you again in November 13 in 3 months. Thank you very much for your time. Bye bye.